Welcome back, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Bily Muzio. With me, as always, Jody Smith. We're going to be diving into Week 6 preview, talking Thursday Night Football. Going to talk some split backfields this week. We're probably going to see from the Commanders tonight, as well as the Seattle's new look backfield as well. Talk about some plays that were some sleeper plays on our rankings this week, and also some valued picks as well as overvalues. We'll get started here briefly, and we'll see you back here in just a quick minute.
Welcome to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, presented by the Fantasy Football World Championship, home to the industry's most accurate rankings.
It's Thursday Night Football, Jody, and boy, do we have another snoozer tonight. Over-under of the game between the Commanders and the Bears is 38. The spread is at +1 to Chicago tonight. I'm not expecting any type of offensive output tonight. What about you, Jody?
Yeah, the game is so intriguing that I actually screwed up my Thursday preview. I actually wrote up about how I liked Washington, and then I picked Chicago +1. But it's not an easy pick. I know, Billy, you and I actually talked a little bit earlier today about it, and you kind of made me waver on that. But I'm going to stick with my original analysis, and that is that Chicago's secondary's been good, but 3 of the 5 quarterbacks they faced, I want to say it was like Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, managed to put up top 13 weeks against them this season so far. I feel like in this situation that from what they've played so far, I hate to say this, but Wentz has actually been the better quarterback. He's actually comfortably exceeded 300 yards in 3 of his 5 games. He struggled in the 2 that they actually against Philly and Dallas, who have legit secondaries. It's not a particularly appealing game, but the bar was set so low last week with the Colts and Broncos, but that there's nowhere to go but up. But my personal my first intuition was the under on this, but at 38, I don't think I'd go under. If anything, that's just such a low number. They're begging you to take the over. So I mean, it makes me suspicious. It's not a game I have a great feeling for either way. I think either result would not really surprise me. So for you sports bettors out there, I don't know that I'd make a very strong play on this, but I'm sticking with my original analysis and my original pick, which was Washington to win by a little bit, maybe by a field goal.
So you're going to take the spread -1 Washington, and did you say under 38? Is that what you're taking?
If forced to pick, yeah. Like I said, I don't like that number. It's so low. They're begging you to take the over, but that's what makes me think, well, it could be an ugly game. Something like a 17-14, 2017, something like that.
2-5.
Two
two safeties and a field goal.
Can you imagine if this game was worse than last Thursday's? I might have to reevaluate my whole approach to Thursday night games, because that game actually, last week had a lot of appeal. We talked a lot about it. I thought, this could be good, but man, it ended up being bad. So
yeah, I actually took the over on this game. I want something to root for, and if I lose, I'm okay throwing the $20.
Hey, I don't have a great feel for this, so honestly, I wouldn't personally make a play in this game. I just look at things through my lenses, and I feel like Carson Wentz is the better quarterback, despite Fields finally looked
serviceable.
Yeah, I was trying to think the word. Serviceable. He looked like he took some strides last week. There were some signs of life there, and that was promising. But we'll see if he can do it in back-to-back games.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look at the passing prop touchdowns in this line, and Wentz is at 1.5. Justin Fields is actually at 0.5, so 1 touchdown gets you over there. Fields' over-under for his passing yards is 169.5. Wentz is 223. So pretty low over-unders on both sides of the ball here or both sides of the field, I should say, between Washington and Chicago. Don't have a strong opinion about this. I do have to say though that in relation to like secondaries, Washington is bottom of the barrel. I mean, we're talking about the 28th ranked secondary defense. So this might be a sneaky Mooney game. I actually am playing him in a couple leagues this week. I mean, when you're looking at bye weeks and injuries, you're forced to play some uncomfortable spots. And Mooney is one of those for me in a couple leagues this week where I'm taking a shot on him. I also did a couple lineups with him in daily fantasy where I threw him in as well just because of the atrocious secondary for the Commanders. And then on the other side of the ball, Chicago, although this one's kind of misleading in my opinion. So you look at it and they're actually a top 10 defense in the secondary, but people aren't really throwing versus them that much because they're getting ahead and they're running the ball. So that take that number with a grain of salt, but from a statistical standpoint, they're bottom 10, but it's primarily, in my opinion, because people are getting ahead and running on them. So you took the spread. You took Washington with -1. I took Chicago +1. My reasonings was the secondary. I thought also looking at how they got Fields involved last week, seeing how they actually threw the ball a little bit more. They utilized him in the rushing game a little bit more. I felt like they finally started untapping that potential in Fields that we kind of thought that was going to be there in his rookie year. We haven't seen it yet fully to what we were kind of hoping Fields would become. That being said, it's nice to see that kind of trend now in the right direction. Let's hope that continues this week in week 6. If not, we're in for another snooze fest tonight. I want to run through just a couple props, and then let's hop over to our rankings for week 6 and kind of talk about some preliminary numbers, and we'll just run through maybe some players that we are higher on versus the consensus in our first run, who were lower on in the consensus versus our first run, and maybe like one sleeper play as well. And then we can answer some start-sit questions for tonight, anyone who's in here listening. But let's go ahead and go on over to rushing props for tonight's game. Antonio Gibson. So we talked about mixed backfields. Brian Robinson made his debut last week after being shot in his lower body. I think it was twice. Saw 9 carries last week. He played only played in 28.6% of the snaps. Gibson did see 47% of the snaps. McKissick saw 46.6% of the snaps. Not a lot on the ground from either of these backs, but from props this week over at DK Sportsbook, not a sponsor, but if you want to be, go ahead and give us a call. Antonio Gibson's line is 18.5 over-under on rushing. Brian Robinson's over-under is 49.5. How do you shake up this backfield moving forward, Jody? What's your thoughts on the rookie? What's your thoughts on Gibson? And also we have to consider McKissick here as the passing catch or the passing down back. How do you think that this backfield shakes up moving forward?
You said Gibson's over-under is 18.5 yards?
That's it. Yeah.
That should be the alarming thing that struck me, because, I mean, I know we all were down on him this summer, and he started the season off pretty well. But you look at the numbers, he has regressed every single week. He's gone from, I don't know what he scored the first week, 13 or 18 PPR points, whatever, and then it was down to 11, then 10, and then it's just completely dwindled to where now we're walking into a game that's on short rest where you would think they want to put more emphasis on the rushing attack in a kind of a muted playbook, but instead it's over-unders 18.5. That's crazy to me. It goes to show, all that dynasty love that Antonio Gibson was getting just, a year and a half ago, as that his value has dwindled so much. And I can't blame it, because, I mean, you look at it this week heading into this game, and they have McKissick, like you said, to play that third down role. And Gibson, he's very good as a pass catcher, but they just like McKissick more. You can look at last year. You can look at last week, and just see that once they went with Robinson, Robinson's debut, he led the team in rushing attempts, and Gibson kind of fell by the wayside there. So he's like the second running. He's like the second running back to run, and he's going to be the second running back to receive. So, yeah, that's the most telling thing to me. I'm kind of curious. Somebody was big on the Brian Robinson touchdown anytime plus 185, which That doesn't seem too unrealistic. Plus 185 is actually a lower payoff than I would have thought. I thought it would have been, over 200 because there's nothing to go by. He just debuted last week and had all of 9 attempts. So, but it tells me that, and then that news broke 2 or 3 hours ago that Robinson, not only is he going to start, but they're probably planning on, putting the whole offense, behind him. So,
yeah, so ECR right now, running back 32. I just can't go that high on him. There's a lot of sharp people I'm looking on here that have him pretty high on their rankings. Like, they have him running back 28, running back 27. The highest that I see him on the ECR right now is running back 20. Convince me. Tell me I'm wrong here, Jody, but I have him down to like 38, I believe. And
a lot of times when you're trying to, compete at something like that, you're trying to, I guess, be bold to differentiate yourself from whoever might be in number one. Do you have any clue anyway who that might be? By the way, Billy, we didn't even talk about that. That's how humble you are, that you are actually the number one fantasy ranker, not only for last year's draft, but now you've really upped your game and you're the number one in-season guy, which congratulations again,
Thank
dude.
You,
I know how hard it is to do that. I know for a fact from the conversations that you and I've had, from the work that we're putting in, how much time you're putting into it, and it's it's paid off brilliantly. But to answer your question, so it's hard, and I think in the situation, even with half PPR, predicting him at 20 points. So you're basically saying, and from a guy who has not been targeted yet in the NFL, so we don't know. He's a complete question mark as a receiver. Maybe he was adequate at college, sure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Washington's willing to throw those passes his way. In particular, when they have 2 other completely acceptable receivers in McKissick and Gibson. So he may not get any targets, or he may just get one or two. So you're relying on to move him close to your top 20, which means you're comfortably stating that he's an RB2 this week. You're basically either banking on that touchdown, or you're thinking he's going to get 80 to 100 rushing yards. And it feels like, personally, I would err on the side of caution there. I kind of want to see it first. I'm excited to see how this plays out tonight. If he ends up putting up something like close to RB20, then we can say, okay, this was, pretty legit, because this is, a very good Chicago. Well, I don't know about very good, but it's decent defense. They've been able to, I think, exceed expectations there.
So Chicago in the run game, they're actually the 24th ranked defense against the run. So I understand there's that going for Brian Robinson tonight. But when we look at fantasy finishes, and let's just go ahead and use the half-point PPR, which is what we're using inside the competition. Running back 20 is 11.6 fantasy points for week 3. You go to week 4, and that's going to be 12.1. You go to week 5, and at that's going to be that didn't work out right. Let's look at that. There we go. It was on standard. Okay, so that goes to 14.6. So at this point, you're relying on a touchdown if you have him at running back 20. And I know you don't, but this is where he's ranked by some of the experts this week. And even if you go down let's go from 20 to running back 30. So running back 29, it's at 10 points. So still, he's going to need, 30, 40 yards and a touchdown at the very least to crack the top 30 in order to get inside that range. Now, Scott just posted inside the stream that there is 30-mile-per-hour wind tonight, gusts in Chicago. So could be another factor of some more ground and pound. You also have some banged-up wide receivers. So Jahan Dotson, who was listed as inactive tonight for the Commanders. Logan Thomas was listed inactive for the Commanders as well. And then you have Denami Brown, who's active but is playing with that injury. So maybe we do see more of a ground game. But projection-wise, if we're saying he's a top 30 back, so let's just say he's a back-end running back 2 now. Let's just call it running back 27, 28. We're now projecting him to probably see 45 to 50% of the snaps. How does that happen with all 3 backs? That's where my mind right now is telling me this isn't possible, because you have a pass catching down back, another back that's very capable of 1 and 2 down as well as third down, but for some reason they just never utilize him. And then now you have the short yardage back, who in my opinion, Brian Robinson is a short yardage back. How do they work all three of these backs into this equation and throw them and have people throw them all inside the top 40? I mathematically, it doesn't add up to me.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Like I said just a few minutes ago, off the top of my head, I was trying to calculate about how many points it would take for him to get up close to RB 20. And yeah, that means you're banking on, if not a touchdown, he needs to get 75 plus scrimmage yards and maybe even catch a couple passes. And we haven't seen him do either of those things yet. We've only seen him rush 9 times, and he wasn't targeted. I don't think he got a target last week. So it feels a bit, I get it. Maybe, like I said, we're just trying to make a name for ourselves and move things up. But
it was plotter status. It was 9 for 22. I mean, that's a 2.4 average. That was horrible. And you hit the hammer on the nail. There was no receptions. There's no targets. I haven't, like I said, running back 38 right now. As I haven't finalized the ranking. It's been tweaked since this morning, but I initially had him as like running back 40, and moved Chase Edmonds down. I moved Naheem Hines down, and looking at a couple other names in the area. But right now I have all three backs there right now at 36, 37, 38, and like something has to give. And I'm having a tough time with this backfield today. I normally don't like to have running backs back to back on the same game, let alone all three of them back to back to back. And so it's just a little challenging, and taking a look at Brian Robinson, I just don't see how it's going to get done. So I guess where I'm trying to go with this is I'm fading Brian Robinson tonight, even though there's a lot of people who are in on him. I'm not a big believer, and I don't like how this game is going to be played out. Let's look at some different lines. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at some of the passing stuff. So receptions wise, Curtis Samuel's over under is 4.5. Do you like the over or under on Curtis Samuel?
Well, something tells me after that informative weather update from meteorologist Scott there, now I'm going to want to lean towards a bunch of unders. But let's just say the wind isn't that out of control, or it doesn't stay that gusty. Curtis Samuel 4.5.
Keep in mind, with John Dawson's out.
With Dotson out and De'Ami Brown, I know he was great last week with a couple of long touchdowns. We can't rely on that again. I think he was only in on 30% of snaps, something like that. So I'm not relying on that. So I'm saying Curtis Samuel going to get 5 catches. I'm going to say no, but it's not something I'm real strong on. I could easily see him doing a 5 for 57 or 6 for 61 type performance.
Yeah, and Curtis Samuel, let's look through his first 5 weeks. Week 1, 8 catches, 11 targets. Week 2, 7 receptions with 9 targets. Week 3, 7 out of 10. Week 4, 4 out of 7. Week 5, 6 out of 8. So he's only gone under 4.5 once. It was week 4 against Dallas. And Wentz was just atrocious that game. And so, I mean, I like the over here.
It's a legit secondary. So, yeah, maybe now that you broke that down, maybe that feels – maybe the over feels right. Like I said, 5 for 51, something like that.
Okay. Next one is Darnell Mooney, and Scott says in here that he really wants to start Darnell Mooney over Dobbs. Can it be done? Which way are you leaning, Romeo Dobbs or Mooney tonight?
Still going to lead with Dobbs. I mean, the Bears have done me so dirty, this first month of the season, because I was on board with maybe not so much Justin Fields this summer, but I infamously ranked Darnell Mooney inside my top 20 of my personal rankings, and I'm going to bomb on that. And it's just like Allen Robinson. These are guys that like everything was lined up for them to be huge, impactful PPR guys that could possibly win you drafts, and the exact opposite has happened. They've completely bombed, and they're destroying my rosters and my teams right now. Like I said, he's done me dirty, so I don't know that I would, if I had a perfectly capable other option to play Sunday in a better matchup with a better quarterback, which in this case you do. I don't know how I would on short rest in this game with potentially gusty weather. I don't know how I'd put Mooney in. I would rather take my chances with Dobbs.
Okay, I like Dobbs as well. I'm gonna pull up my rankings right now to see where I have each of them. So preliminary rankings again, folks. Romeo Dobbs is at wide receiver 31. Prelim rankings at the couple of receivers ahead of him. There's some news with like T. Higgins and Olave. So these are subject to change, of course, based upon news leading up to Sunday.
Yep.
And then Mooney. Let's find Mooney. 36 this week. So close, but I do have Dobbs ahead of him.
I do too, 30 and 38.
So we're both very close in those. So both of us, Scott, go with Dobbs here. They seem to have a great connection with Aaron Rodgers, and he's been pretty consistent there. We have another question here. Thanks for the great pod, guys. Mostert, or Melvin Gordon this week? Oh, man. This was a tough one because Mostert's been heavily involved in this offense, but he also is now looks like he's battling an injury this week. Melvin Gordon, on the other hand, gets the Chargers, and the Chargers are just atrocious versus the run. They're the 32nd ranked defense versus the run. They've given up 619 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground alone. They've given up another 191 receiving yards to running backs and another 3 scores to the running back position for an average of 32 PPR points a week to running backs. That's a lot of points to be given up. I like Boone this week. I like Melvin Gordon this week. I mean, there was news they didn't practice, but if he's out there, I'm probably leaning Melvin Gordon this week against the Chargers. Kind of a revenge game narrative.
Yep.
On top of it, you have just the atrocious defense. Which way do you lean here, Mostert or Gordon?
I've got Gordon ranked 2 or 3 spots ahead of Mostert. Like you said, they both have that Q in front of their names right now, so it's something to monitor. I'm not overly concerned about either one of them being hurt, but yeah, it feels like in this situation, it feels like Gordon's the way to go.
Yeah, Gordon probably going to come in as my running back 15-16 range, where Mostert's probably going to be in that 18 through 19 range, most likely in my rankings.
That's where I have them both right now.
Yeah, and so Minnesota against the run right now is faring pretty well. Where were they? Middle of the pack, 14th best. So simply breaks down the matchup for me, and we just don't know what they're going to do. They might get Edmonds more involved. They're probably not going to, but if he truly is battling an injury, don't be surprised to see maybe a mixture of more Mostert and even Gaskins on the field. So I'm staying away from Miami right now. That was nice of Bobby Boucher. Thank you, Bobby. Thanks for the kind comment. Salvatore, thanks for the Discord help. You're welcome, Salvatore. And then Balls Life says, I love the idea of Fields as a fantasy asset. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. No, but I kind of have him as a sleeper tonight. So where does Fields come in on your rankings for this week?
I believe I have him inside my top 20. I think I have him around 18, but I may have moved him up to 16, 17 in that range. At that point, I'm basically saying, in a 1 QB league, you're obviously, I don't think starting him. I don't think you could do it. I mean, he's got the athleticism where all he's got to do is break off a 25, 30-yard run, and that adds up so much for quarterbacks. It's so bonkers, like how inadequate the Giants quarterback. Why is his name escaping me off?
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones looks so inadequate on some drives throwing the ball, and then he just runs for 25, 30 yards or punt one in, and it just those points pile up. And you get that with Fields. My hesitation with him has always been remember, this staff that's now blowing up everything for the Bears and wanting to start over, they're not the ones that drafted him. They're not the one who spent all that capital. So I don't feel like so far they've really done a very good job of trying to build an offense around him. What the first month of the season has told me is they're not comfortable or confident in him as a thrower at all, which is why you see them 32nd in pass and almost record-setting pace that we haven't seen since the early 90s or earlier, with the team being this incompetent through the air. And that tells me that this new staff hasn't liked what they've seen out of him. Doesn't mean that they can't figure some things out, but it has me worried. The silver lining there was last week. He looked he looked better last week. It was his best performance of the year through the air. Cole Kmet actually showed a pulse, and Mooney, I think he exceeded 50 yards last week. He might have only had a couple of catches, but hey, for us that invested so much in him, we'll take that. So.
Yeah, so he clipped the 200-yard mark for the first time in the air, 208 yards. He only had one touchdown in the air, but he did rush for 47 yards, and you hit the hammer on the nail. That's what's propping up his fantasy points right now. 17 fantasy points last week, finished as quarterback 13 on the week. Just to shows you how important those extra 50 yards are in the air and his rushing stats on the ground. We listed earlier that the Commanders have a bottom five defense in their secondary. If he's able to get anywhere close to 200 yards again, it can get back to that 40 to 60 rushing yards on the ground. That puts him in that, quarterback 14 through 16 range. I have him this week listed as my quarterback number 15. I think it's about 2 spots higher than ECR. So I'm actually starting him in a couple leagues as my single quarterback. So I'm risking it for the biscuit, but I do think that he has a similar output to last week. I'm not saying he's going to be top 13 again, but 14 through 17 is definitely in the realm of possibilities. He's not going to be a back-end quarterback one. I just don't see it. It's Thursday Night Football. The next question we have is, I like the way he spelled Latavius. Close enough. Latavius Murray's usage this week looking like Murray or Etienne.
Latavius Murray's we was inactive last week. We haven't seen him even on the field for Denver, so you can't start him.
No, I agree. And it's Monday Night Football. You don't know if he's going to be inactive.
And we're team ETN over here. We're finally starting to feel like after the last couple of games, like maybe this is the week where he separates himself from James Robinson and becomes what we wanted him to be.
I still feel like had he caught those first 2 touchdowns week 1, didn't drop them, this would be not even discussed. He'd be the running back 1 there on the team, but those drops, I think, just killed him. Next question from Jose, who is a avid listener to the show. Very, very loyal fan here. Jose, thank you. Welcome to the show tonight. Stevenson or Gabe Davis at the flex? That's actually a pretty good one.
Oh, that's a good one because you have to love what we saw from Ramondre last week. I think he had 27 touches and 175 yards. And now without Damien Harris, there's basically – all we have behind him is Pierre Strong, and I think they're going to bring up Kevin Harris, who hasn't even seen the field yet. So you have to think, again, in this kind of I feel like what Billy, we kind of talked about this earlier in the week. So we saw what Bill Belichick was able to do to Jared Goff last week, and I feel like he's extremely familiar with Jacoby Brissett. So you have to think that he's going to have an ace game plan of how to slow down Jacoby Brissett. And at the same time, he's not going to want his rookie quarterback in there throwing the ball and making a lot of plays and all that. So I see a ton of opportunities for Ramondre. Now, Gabe Davis, you have to potentially sit him in a game that could be that has the highest over-under on the week. Ooh, that's a good problem to have. It really is.
Jose, is there anybody else that you can choose to sit? Because these are 2 must-start guys, in my opinion, this week.
Yeah,
there has to be somebody else. So let us know if there's anybody else on your lineup that you are even considering. Because, for instance, Ramondre Stevenson is my running back 5 this week. He might end up being my running back 4 this week. I might move him ahead of Christian McCaffrey. Jody.
Billy, off the top of your head, like I said, with the game script of Bill Belichick probably relying on the ground game and basically nothing proven behind him, what's your over-under on his touches? 25?
It's going to be, I think, 25, including if you include, so if it's total touches, not just rushes, it's over 25. We could see potentially 22 to 23 carries alone this game. And I was doing some data. I posted some of the red zone data for the positions. And this is, when I say red zone, it's inside the 20. So not just inside the 5 or inside the 10. Those are all encompassing red zone inside the 20. And if you go to the running back position, I only posted the attempts. And if you look at the attempts, none of these backs were inside the top 12. But this was the interesting one. If you go to receptions, running back receptions inside the red zone, there's a back in here that significantly affects this ranking, and it's Damien Harris. He was tied for 3rd in receptions in the red zone with 4. If Ramondre picks up all those, which we're expecting him to, as well as his regular usage that he was seeing in passing game, as well as his touches, you're also talking about a run defense, Cleveland Browns, who's the 28th ranked against the run. This is a recipe for a very, very, very big week. Like I said, I have him ahead of Jonathan Taylor right now. I have him one spot behind Christian McCaffrey right now. He's literally my running back 5 in my preliminary rankings.
I'm kind of curious to see what kind of roster is to the point where you have to bench one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean that's a monster roster if you have to bench one of these guys.
I mean, I'm just guessing that it's Jose, right?
Yeah, Jose. If you're still in here, buddy, just post it in the chat. Let us know if there's anybody else you can.
I'm guessing that maybe he drafted Ramondre as his RB 3 or 4, and now maybe he's had an injury or something. He stepped up, and now you want to put him in your lineup. But
here it is. Roster construction for running back and wide receiver is 1 each and 2 flex spots. He has Hall, Stevenson, and Walker as possible starters, and Chase, Gabe Davis as possible receiver starters. So I'm starting Stevenson above Hall and Walker this week. I'm probably benching Walker.
Ken Walker, yeah. Again, a lot of hype, clearly going off on him. We saw the 61-yard touchdown last week. We're excited now that he's going to get a ton of workload with Rashad Penny gone. But, yeah, I agree that I can't.
It's Pete Carroll. He's going to use DJ Dallas.
Yeah, I couldn't sit Ramondre for Ken Walker.
No.
Everything's lined up. And we just saw Ramondre awesome last week. And we just saw, and like you said, Cleveland's been terrible against the run. Yeah.
And then you look at if you look at the total receptions right now, Breece Hall has the second highest target percentage of running backs, target share, I should say, out of all running backs in the league right now. So you need to start Hall here. I think that Walker's the odd man out in this group. I'm starting Gabe Davis, and like Jody said, probably the highest over-under of the week. I'm starting Stevenson, who's my running back 5 this week. So I'm sitting Walker out of this group here.
Great job either on the waiver wire or in the mid to late round part of your draft, getting all those guys. I think things are looking beautiful for you here in October.
He must have listened to the podcast, Jody.
Somebody must know what they were doing. That's all I'm saying.
Next question, guys. Ayuk or Curtis Samuel or ETN? I'm going Curtis Samuel here. How about you, Jody?
I might lean ETN, but Ayuk is going to definitely be the odd man out. You can't like what he's done so far, and Jimmy Garoppolo's not exactly putting any confidence in it. It's kind of the matchup's probably okay for them this week, but I have to see something from him before to even consider it. Jaguars are playing the Colts. It's not the best matchup. James Robinson had a good game against them earlier. So, and now that we kind of feel like maybe the torch is being passed back to ETN, I have some interest there, but, it's fine to go with – what was the other choice?
Curtis Samuel, Ayuk, or ETN.
Yeah, I don't know. You said Samuel, so I don't want to, have conflicting opinion here. I personally would probably lean towards Travis Etienne. If for the only thing else, I'm a little wary of this game, so I wouldn't want to have that. Of course, that's the thing with these Thursday games. So when you start a guy and he has a terrible game, you have to sit on that for 3 days and get upset about it and be angry. Of course, the exact opposite is true as well. If you overanalyze things and you sit a guy and he goes bonkers on Thursday, you have to take the L. But at least in that case, the other guy that you set him for at least has the chance to make up for it.
So we have a rule in our start sets when we're doing our dilemmas in our high stakes leagues, and it is I will never sit a full-time receiver for a part-time running back. And
it's a pretty good strategy.
And though Travis Etienne did see a kind of a turn of a page last week where he saw 53.3% of the snaps versus James Robinson's 40, if you go on over and use a snap share, you take a look at the snap shares for Washington. So I'm just going to pull them up so I have them here. Curtis Samuel seeing 90.5% of snaps. So I want the person who's on the field that much. Curtis Samuel, we just went over all the targets and the receptions that he was using. Yes, it's a fairly windy night, but that being said, He is used in a creative manner in this offense. I like the way they get plays dialed up for him, so I'm going to go Curtis Samuel here. But I definitely agree with you, Jody. Odd man out is Brandon Ayuk. Next one we have is I didn't drop Jahan Dotson to pick up Elijah Moore. Was that a mistake? No, you have to keep Jahan Dotson.
Mm-hmm.
Next one from Naughty again. Give it to me straight. I traded away Diggs for Walker and Hopkins. Okay, not horrible. What's your take here, Jody?
I like trades generally. When it's a 2-for-1, I want to be the one getting the one because I feel like the one plus whatever reserve I have is generally going to add up to more than the other ones. That said, I guess, I mean, it would have been a hard sell for me to accept that, as a Diggs person. But the Cardinals desperately need DeAndre Hopkins back in that lineup. So I'm really interested and excited. Like I tweeted earlier, I think last week that, well, we're only 16 days away if you've persevered and you've gone this long without DeAndre Hopkins. This week is the last week that we're without him. And hey, you know what? If Ken Walker turns out to be a 15-plus touch guy, which I think is, for me, is the biggest question. Like, just because he took over for Rashad Penny, let's not act like Rashad Penny was awesome the first 5 weeks of the season. He had that one game. But by and large, Rashad Penny was a little disappointing. And this is for a Seattle team that has really exceeded expectations in every capacity. They've been far better in every area of the field except running the ball. And I think we all were expecting a little bit of that momentum from Penny to carry over, and he wasn't great. So there's no guarantee that all of a sudden Kenneth Walker is going to be getting 12, 14, 16 carries. I'm excited. I hope so, because I have him in more than one league. So I'd like to see, that play out. And in my main league where I'm in, I desperately need reinforcement, especially with the bye weeks here. So it's not a horrible trade. It's just that I personally would prefer to have been on the Diggs side.
I'm the same. Plus, you have Hopkins coming back into the mix. He hasn't been gelling with the
It's a rule like Bily. I love that rule you just said about I'm not benching a full-time receiver for a part-time running back. One of mine is generally if there's a 3-for-2 or a 2-for-1, I generally want to be on the lower side of that because you're probably getting the most impactful player in the deal. And if you're sitting here on a random Thursday in October listening to us talk about fantasy football, then you're probably pretty serious about the hobby and about the sport, and you're probably above average when it comes to how you construct your rosters and how your team was drafted and built. So that tells me that Diggs plus random guy on your bench is probably better, but that's just my own personal strategy. It's not by any means. It's by no means is it an egregious trade.
I'm 100% on the same page with you, Jody. I like to have the best player in the offense, and Diggs for me was my wide receiver 1 coming into the year. He's on the best offense in the league. We're going to see a lot of high totals for the Buffalo Bills, and I want to have a piece of that offense. Jose just clarified and said that all those guys that he drafted were in the draft because he listens in to the show. There we go.
Great job, man.
Great job, Jose. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our rankings. We got about 15 more minutes before we get out of here so we can go watch some football. But let's take a look at our rankings. Give me one running back that you are lower on versus consensus in your preliminary rankings, and tell me why.
Oh, just off the bat, Khalil Herbert I thought was overranked. I don't know if it's still fresh in mind what he did when David Montgomery was out of the lineup, but you take away that touchdown he scored in week 1, and Khalil Herbert has been around and half PPR scoring. He's been around 3 to 5 points, generally speaking, except for that, that blow-up game. But remember, David Montgomery's back, and last week, Khalil Herbert, where did he get? 3 or 4 touches? I don't think he got a catch, or if he did, he got like 1 target. So this quickly, we went from David Montgomery missing multiple weeks to coming back and taking like 80-something% of the snap share and the touches and whatnot in that backfield. So I want to say that Khalil Herbert was in ECR was ranked somewhere in the mid to late 30s, and I felt like I don't see how. I don't personally, the way I evaluate this game in the rankings, I don't see him getting those touches. He'd have to break off a long run, or he'd have to punch in a fluke touchdown. And again, looking at the usage last week with David Montgomery seemingly healthy, I felt like Herbert was at least 7 or 8 spots too high.
Yeah, I agree on Herbert. I moved him down as well. When you look at the active games of David Montgomery and the usage of Khalil Herbert, week 1, he only saw 9 attempts. Week 2, he saw 4 attempts. Week 3 is the game that he blew up after Montgomery exited. He had 20 attempts for 157 yards. You're right. Then the following week, 19 attempts, 77 yards. Last week, only 4 attempts for 11 yards, 0 targets, 0 receptions. Clearly not a part of the game plan. Only 28% of snaps versus David Montgomery's 72. I moved him down, I think, 4 spots. It's probably not even low enough because we only had 1.1 fantasy points last week. So I like that call definitely.
Another one off the top of my head is Najee Harris.
Still
ranked somewhere around RB20, and you're talking about they're playing the Bucs, who what are they getting up, like the 3rd fewest fantasy points?
They're the number 1 defense versus the run.
But okay, so and the key thing here is Jaylen Warren is becoming their pass catching back. He's been coming in on 3rd down, so you're talking about a very negative game script for the running game as it is. And if Jaylen Warren's the one coming in getting those dump off targets and whatnot, I don't see how Harris can approach top 20 numbers. He'd have to be a top 20 running back. He'd have to get a touchdown, and like you just said, the number 1 run defense. You can't like those odds.
So that was the pick I was gonna say. I'm glad you started with it because last week I had Najee. I had Najee ranked as my running back 30 last week. ECR was like 16 or 15. So there's only one person who had him lower than me, and I think he finished as running back 42 last week.
Oh yeah, he was. Wait, I was looking at that today. I was like, "Ooh, man!" I mean, that's why people are starting to call him Trent Richardson Jr. and stuff like that. Like, ooh, you hate to hear that.
Jody, there was a certain article on Full-Time Fantasy that listed him as a fade, and all the reasons that we're seeing in this season. Offensive line, game scripts, poor quarterback play. I think these were all listed in that article and the reasons why to fade Najee at cost. And at this point now, I wouldn't even take him in round 4 or 5. But the writing was on the wall, and it continues to be overranked inside these preliminary ECR rankings.
The thing is, last year he had a really good first season, but remember he was playing like 90-something% of snaps. That's not a sustainable rate for running back. So we knew that was going to come down, and here we're seeing it. An undrafted kid is now coming on and taking reps, and like you said,
so without cheating, without looking right now, I have the data in front of me, so I can cheat, but you cannot cheat. What was the snap share last week between Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris?
Let's see. I was probably looking at something like that earlier. Snap share was probably something like 60-40.
And who do you think had 60?
Well, I'm saying Harris, but I know that Jaylen Warren was in there pretty often.
50.7 versus 49.3.
Oh, wow. That's a little bit closer than I thought. But
Jaylen Warren led snaps.
Yeah, see, that's bonkers for a guy, like I said, because Harris was getting 85-90% snap share last year, which, like I said, that's crazy for a running back.
So target share, Jaylen Warren, you hit the hammer on the nail. Jaylen Warren saw 9.8% of the target share versus 7.8 for Najee. Rushing share, you were closer with that. 64.7 rush share. Jaylen Warren 29.4 rush share. Man. But we're talking about a near 50-50 snap now.
Another interesting thing, sorry to interrupt on this game because the stats freshman. This is only the 5th or 6th time in 42 years that Pittsburgh has been a home dog of 7 or more points. So game script, big time favors Warren in this game.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm a tape guy, and you know that. Watching the tape, Jaylen Warren looks better. I'm going to say it right now. He's quicker. Mm-hmm. He's getting to the edge. He looks better in the passing game. all around, he looks like the better running back through the first few weeks of the season. And I know people are going to go bonkers on that because, it's Najee Harris, and he was a top 5 running back last year. It doesn't matter what happened last year. It's matter what's happening this year, and it matters what's going to continue to happen with this season. And if they continue to split the ball like they did, Jaylen Warren saw 50.7% of snaps. Najee saw 49.3. If that continues, Najee Harris is not even a top 30 running back moving forward.
So you're saying Jaylen Warren is Pittsburgh's Travis Etienne?
Pretty much. I like that decipher. That was a good decipher. Now give me a player. It can be running back, receiver, tight end. It can be anybody. Give me a player that you are higher on versus consensus and why this week.
Oh, I have to look it up. I don't think that I've done too much higher.
And we can't talk about. We just talked about Ramondre, so it can't be Ramondre.
Man. I would say David Montgomery, but no, I think I'm actually around. I think I'm around his ECR off the top of my head. Sorry, things are going slow because I'm on here.
It's okay. I can stall for you.
Yeah, why don't you talk about one of your guys while I'm futilely waiting for this to load?
So somebody I'm a lot higher on versus ECR right now is Eno Benjamin. I guess it's kind of cheating, but I'm going to do it. Eno Benjamin right now is ECR is running back 30. They're playing Seattle, and Seattle is 27th ranked defense against the running back position, so bottom 5. They've given up 645 rushing yards to the running backs, 4 touchdowns, another 225 yards through the air. James Conner's not going to be playing this week. Darrell Williams not playing this week. They just brought in Tyson Williams, and I forget the other scrub they signed off the street, but it doesn't matter. Eno Benjamin is going to be an every down running back for this team this week against Seattle, and I expect this to be a fairly high point totals, quite frankly. And I'm going to say in my preliminary rankings, he's going to be coming in about running back 13, maybe for 12. So twice as high as ECR right now.
Wow. Yeah, I missed a chance to pick him up off waivers in my home league because I'm sitting there. I was number 2, and somebody else wasted a waiver on Tony Jones. And what's funny is I get into it. This guy has a real rivalry with me, and I have Ken Walker in my home league. I think he used his number 1 waiver wire on Tony Jones because he thought he was going to block me. I didn't even have a waiver claim in for anybody, so I'm like, what were you thinking? Because my best buddy Clay, who's he's a smart dude. He was able to get Eno Benjamin, which I should have had on my roster because I have James Conner. I didn't successfully. I didn't. Our rosters aren't that flexible where we can have all these spare pieces. But I was looking through me plus ECR, and the highest guy I could find is Chris Olave, but he's only a little bit lower than he's probably would normally be because of the concussion concerns. I have him. I'll start with the preliminary where I think about he'll come in, and then if he's obviously if he's not cleared, then you just simply remove him from your rankings. That way, it's just a little more smooth for the way I do my process. But I feel like with Michael Thomas. Looking, pretty iffy, maybe even leaning towards out for this game. And, Jarvis Landry also questionable. Feels like if Chris Olave is cleared, he's going to look at a ton of targets. However, another thing is with the Saints, again, another injury concern is what are they doing at quarterback? Because what I've kind of wanted to warn people about this week is everyone's getting excited about Taysom Hill. Let's remember that Hill's going bonkers with Andy Dalton in. Hill wasn't very involved at all when Winston was back there. So when Jameis Winston comes back, I don't know that they're going to be as willing to give Taysom Hill all these touches. Now they talk like, hey, we're going to do this moving forward, and it makes sense because Hill's been great, and of course they're paying him a big buttload of money. You might as well use the guy, but it should be a concern, something for people to think about, that if Jameis Winston is back under center, Taysom Hill might not be able to get in there and have as many reps under center. Just something that I've been thinking about. So there's a lot of questions this week that need to get cleared up in the next 3 days for the Saints.
Okay, I like it. Now give me one player outside the top 50, either running back or wide receiver, that you think has a chance to significantly outperform ECR and why? And I'll start so you can have some time to think about it. And mine's going to be Robbie Anderson this week. Because we have PJ Walker who's going to be starting, so they're freeing the shackles off of this offense with Baker Mayfield probably not playing, and so hopefully it's a hashtag free me week for DJ Moore as well. But when you look at the splits with Robbie Anderson and the times that he's been on the field with PJ Walker, Robbie Anderson has been seen over 30% of the target share for the offense. Now I don't expect that type of volume this week, but if we can see anywhere near that, and they're able to get the ground game going as well, with Christian McCaffrey, this offense is probably going to be, the defense is probably going to be spread. It's going to be nice and open, and I think Robbie Anderson is going to have a sneaky game. So PJ Walker, Robbie Anderson splits are looking good, and that's my sleeper play of the week.
It's a pretty sneaky one because I think that Walker and Anderson, if I'm not mistaken, they were at college together. So they have that. I think the last time that Walker got a start, he was looking Robbie Anderson's way quite a bit. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head because people need to understand that, for the most part with the initial rankings, we're kind of looking to attack this Thursday game and get it as right as we can. And we'll do some tweaking over the next 2 or 3 games. That's why when you log on to Full-Time Fantasy and you go to the rankings, there's a big disclaimer in there where I say, hey, for finalized versions, wait till about, 45 minutes to an hour after kickoff, because it's very integral that you wait and let's see how the inactives come in, because you have that 90 minutes for us to tweak things and adjust things or whatnot.
And they can be moved a lot. I mean, you're talking about, like, look at Slayton last week, all those inactives. Slayton moved up for me 35 spots in the rankings.
For instance, like right now on ECR, Michael Thomas is wide receiver 70. Clearly, a lot of us are thinking he's not going to play. But what if, we find out Sunday that Thomas is cleared and he's ready to roll? Well, then, he's going to move up 50 spots, maybe even more. So,
and that's going to move down Olave a little bit. It's going to move everybody.
That means if you just simply move them up 50 spots, that means 49 other guys are moving down a spot. So that's why it's important to, kind of keep checking things and maybe ask questions. But I hate to say it, but a lot of times, especially if you have a lot of lineups to put in that last few minutes, you have to hurry up and adjust the kind of things. But that's why it's Bily, I know in Discord it's been going crazy for you, and it's only going to get more hectic this week now that you're number one. But when it comes to trying to do your own personal stuff, trying to get everything right with Fantasy Pros, trying to get everything right on my end with projections for Full-Time Fantasy, and on me, I'm having to hurry up and remove guys from IDP side, everything. I've got to do all this, and then I'm trying to answer 2 or 3 different Discord channels. So needless to say that on my time, it's, we get a noon kickoff. So like 10:20 to noon, it's just, what's the meme of the cat tag?
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, that's basically, what it feels like. But we love it. We get to do it. We're fortunate to where we get 17 or 18 beautiful weeks a year to do this kind of thing, but it's awesome. But, it's just, I'm going to go off on that tangent, but that's why it's important, like I said, to get, do your homework, but be prepared for that madness right before kick.
So it looks like we missed a couple questions. We just want to hammer these out real quick. We'll just do them rapid fire, and then we'll get out of here, get preps for some football. I got wings in the oven right now. I'm going to pull them out. I didn't eat them on the podcast this time, folks. People got mad last time. I was eating wings on a podcast.
Unprofessional.
I'm sitting there, I'm eating wings on the podcast.
Is it mad because they didn't get the wings?
Yeah, I'm sitting there eating wings. Some dude goes, "Who the hell eats wings on a podcast?" I said, "This guy. I eat wings on a podcast. I'm hungry, man." So the questions we have were, I 100% Dobbins Lazard for me. So trade Najee and Renfro for Dobbins and Lazard. I just don't like Najee.
Yeah, you've hit on that. Who was it?
Najee and Renfro for Dobbins and Lazard. Which side do you like?
It feels like a slight upgrade at both spots, maybe. I can see you doing that, especially. I mean, Harris theoretically is an upgrade over J.K. Dobbins, but in the last 15 minutes, we've kind of went the other direction there. So it's not a great trade, I don't feel like, but I guess it feels like maybe it's a small upgrade from Renfro to Lazard and from Harris to Dobbins, but your concern with Dobbins is the lack of touches. Is he getting enough touches? I mean, would you rather have 16 to 18 touches a week from Harris or whatever the 11 to 13 that Dobbins is going to get you? That's where it becomes a little risky.
So I had a debate with somebody on Twitter at the beginning of the season about Alan Lazard, and that certain individual, I'm not going to mention names here, that certain individual did not like Alan Lazard. And I don't necessarily love Alan Lazard either, but I like the wide receiver 1 for Green Bay, whoever that's going to be, because we know it's going to be a productive receiver. And if you take out week 1, because Alan Lazard did not play week 1, he is the wide receiver 22 on the week. He's only averaging 0.3 points outside the top 20. And if you actually include his inactive week, he's a top 34 wide receiver right now in the league. So Lazard is sneaky. I know people don't like him. They look at him and say, oh, it's a vanilla play, or it just doesn't have the flashiness of, someone like Gabe Davis, who is, going in that same range. But I'm going to say Lazard is going to continue to produce as long as he's on the field. And Aaron Rodgers trusts him. He's going to go to him, and he's going to consistently use him. And Dobbins is only going to see the field more and more and more as he's coming off that injury, and they get more trust in his knee and more trust in his ability to stay healthy and on the field. So I'm going to go with Dobbins and Lazard. This one, last question, then we're going to get out of here, is D-Hop and Goddard for Barkley a good trade? No, Barkley all day for me.
If you're getting Barkley, it's a good trade.
Correct. Yeah, Barkley all day. If you're giving up Barkley, absolutely not. But I mean, Barkley's the running back 1 right now, I think.
I mean, even if I said I need more context of your roster construction or who you have it tied in and all that, no, you give up guy Barkley. If he's not the running back 1, he's like RB2 or 3. You don't. I mean, as long as he's active every week, he's been an absolute monster. So no.
They're saying I should eat wings in the broadcast now. Next time I'll bring them back. I'll bring the wings back next week, Jody. I think that's it, folks. Good luck in your matchups. Good luck in your DFS for tonight for Thursday Night Football. Good luck in any bets that you have as well. If you are into sports betting, make sure to check out Vegas Whispers, another great site. Vegas Whispers is the name. Then the name is the reason for the site. Get a lot of information from people in Vegas that are seeing some of these bets. So I want to make sure that we head on over to Vegas Whispers, take a look at some of those bets if you want to get into sports betting. Definitely some good lines. We'll see you all back here Saturday night. I'll be doing the podcast for the injury recaps and answering any of your start sit questions going into Sunday morning. And also we'll be here on Discord all the way through kickoff on Sunday as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Like the podcast. Make sure to just hit that like button, smash like, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done it so. We'll see you all back here on Saturday. Have a good night and good luck.